Welcome to another episode of KRYPTON'S Legacy is Superman podcast and vidcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, Nick. Nick, how's it going?
Happy to be here. Happy to be back talking Superman and Adam. I love technology. I will just
Yeah,
I'll just say that.
Brainiac is attacking today because
Brainiac was attacking us before stream.
we started this 5 minutes ago, but we couldn't hear each other, so here we
Yeah,
are.
here
But
we
we can
are.
hear each other now. You can hear each other. You can hear us and hopefully see us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this whole video didn't work, which would be another
Hopefully you
set.
can see us.
But hopefully you are seeing us and hearing us. And we're going to talk Superman on the road to Superman 2025. One of the things that we wanted to do was go through and revisit all the live action Superman films. Today we're going to do that going back to 1978 and Superman the movie, which of course starred Christopher Reeve in the title role. It starred Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. It starred Marlon Brando as Jor-El, and a whole host of other fine acting folks. So that's the movie we're going to be discussing in the second half of our show. As always, when there is news regarding the particular IP or property we're talking about, we bring it to you. There's not much in terms of the upcoming movie as it's in post-production. Still, no official casting announcements for Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, although I'm sure those are pending. Probably dropping as we record if our luck is any indication. But as of the moment we hit recording, there's been nothing as of yet. So, two things that I think are noteworthy in terms of the news. One is more unfortunate. It is the passing of actor James Earl Jones, who most of the known world will recognize as the voice of Darth Vader in Star Wars and the voice of Mufasa in The Lion King. Why am I bringing him up on a Superman podcast, you may ask? Well, simply put, because he has a Superman connection. He guest starred in an episode of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Let me get the details here. He played the publisher of the Daily Planet. It was Franklin Stern, and the episode was The House of Luthor, which is probably the first live action thing that I saw him in. And then, of course, I had heard him in The Lion King. I came to Star Wars later, so I heard, obviously, I knew he was Darth Vader, but I hadn't watched it for myself until years later. So those Lois and Clark was probably the first thing that I recognized him from outside of Lion King, depending on when his episode aired. But it's pretty cool that, someone of my generation recognizes him from Lois and Clark and Star Wars. And then you have my niece, who is 7, knows him from his voice as Mufasa. That's pretty cool, and it's just a thing that it shows how vast his reach was, and his appeal to a broad multi-generational audience. But Nick, what are some of your thoughts, of James and when you saw him first and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was pretty devastated. This is obviously a loss that affects a lot of people. It goes a ways back because, like you just said, he was the voice of Darth Vader. He was Mufasa. He was in one of my favorite movies of all time, Field of Dreams. He had a pretty prominent role in that. He was in Lois and Clark, so he just seemed like a genuine human being that people loved to be around. He loved what he did. He used his voice in a meaningful way. You know, a lot of people might not have known this, but he was a person who stuttered. You know, I did want to bring that up. And, you know, my best friend who I co-host my podcast with, you know, he part of the reason why he really heavily inspired James Earl Jones heavily inspired my best friend Nico. So because he used his voice, used his platform as a means to sort of inspire multiple generations of people. So this was a tough loss. A lot of people felt it, myself included, and his voice and his presence are surely gonna forever live on.
Yeah, and Nico did a great piece, video honoring
Please
James
watch
Earl
it.
Jones on, I think it's TikTok, right?
Yes,
So
it'll be on his Twitter too. But yeah,
yeah, it's also on
TikTok.
his. That's where I found it.
Yes.
But so definitely check that out. It's very moving and very powerful and well done by Nico. And rest well to James Earl Jones. Thank you for the vast amounts of entertainment and joy you brought to a multi generational group of people. Your work and memory will live on through that, and you will be missed. Uh, with that said, there is also, before we get to Superman Legacy, there is another film coming out on, I believe it's September 21st, if
Yeah.
my dates are correct.
Hmm.
And I believe there's also screenings on the 25th. It's a documentary
Yep.
called Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. Uh, Recently, a couple weeks ago, as of this recording, we got a trailer for it. And boy, was that trailer powerful and impactful. Um, they obviously they show and talk about him getting the role of Superman. They show some scenes from that, but it really is more about his life after his horse racing accident, or horse riding, not racing, I should say. Um, and it just shows the type of struggle that going through that was, and it also obviously in the film, um, you hear voiceover from Christopher Reeve where he talks about not being sure that he wanted to continue living at one point, but then it was the encouragement of his wife
Yeah.
and for his kids that he decided to persevere and continue going forward. But then also um, how he channeled his energy and his recovery and his efforts to not only find a cure for the paralysis that he faced, but also to help to create the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation to help with research and development for uh, different therapies and cures, and for people who were um, struggling with the same sort of scenario that he was, whether their affliction be different than it, but ultimately having a similar result. He was championing to find cures for all. And there's one line in the trailer where at the beginning he's like, you know, uh, we're talking about Superman, and he said, I'm not that guy. I just played that guy.
Yeah.
That was just a role.
Right.
But and maybe that's how he felt early in his career. But I think with his um, level of championing for a cure and his devotion and his determination that he showed in battling his own situation, he became a Superman in real life for so many people.
Yeah.
Um, So while that just was a role that he played, he certainly became the embodiment of that through the way he handled his post accident life and his recovery, and what he tried to do for others. It is very much in the spirit of the character that he played so famously. Man, the trailer was like 3 minutes
I know.
and 3 seconds or something of that regard.
Yeah.
I think I had tears in my eyes in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I unfortunately I have a wedding on the day it's going to be in theaters, and I don't know if it'll be in theaters on the 25th here, or if that's more an international date. So I may not get to see it in theater, but you can bet as soon as I can get my hands on a copy, be it via streaming or physical purchase,
I'll pirate it for you.
I'm going. I'm going to watch it, and then, but it's. I don't know how I'm going to get through it, because in the way we were just talking about how Nico was affected by the passing of James Earl Jones, I was in that same sort of feeling when Christopher Reeve passed away all those years ago. Again, I don't have I don't have the same affliction that he had, but as a person with a disability, I can um, look at how he handled himself, um, and how he strived to better those uh, in that situation, and take sort of inspiration from that, in the sense that, if I some days I wake up having a bad day, or not feeling that great, but when I look at the way he handled himself, who am I to complain, right? And so, and also I had a friend of mine who has since passed away, uh, who had muscular dystrophy, so he was, wheelchair bound, and he had the tube and stuff to help him breathe and stuff. So, regardless of dealing with my own, disability, watching my friend go through that and have Christopher Reeve as an example and as a role model, uh, his passing was very tough to deal with, and very impactful in the same way that James Earl Jones has hit Nico.
Yeah.
But to see this film being made, I think it's very important to get his full story out there, because again, I think it could only serve to further inspire people, and further, spur them on to continue the work through the foundation that he that he championed and started and really fought for. So I think it's very important, and I'm glad that this film is being presented and shown to the world, and I'm looking forward to seeing it, even though it's going to be hard to get through without shedding, without resinking the Titanic,
Yeah.
as I'm sure it will probably happen. But Nick, what are some of your thoughts on
Yeah.
just Christopher Reeve and the trailer?
Oof, I have so much to say. I hope I remember all of it. I will just say, first and foremost, I will echo your last sentiment there and say I sincerely apologize to all theater employees, because that theater aisle is probably going to be a bucket of tears. Kind of us walking out of that. So much so that, Adam, I kid you not, and I kid our listeners not, I felt like I was going to be so emotional, if not watching that trailer, actually watching the thing in the theater. I'm going with my mother to go see
Oh,
this thing. Granted, I'm a full grown adult, so I could probably see a movie or documentary of that caliber myself. But you know what? I was like, Mom, I think you need to go see this with me. So
right.
Yeah, so just if that's any indication for everybody on how I think most of us are gonna feel, I think that's a good one. Dude, this trailer completely ployed me. I know you know how much Christopher Reeve, Superman meant to me. As a person, as an inspiration. Growing up, I remember when I watched that episode of Smallville and I saw him
Mm,
with Tom Welling.
mm,
And that just completely like devastated me because I had found out that that was Superman. Like, because at the time Smallville was my Superman, and then I
sure.
found out that Christopher Reeve was Superman, and like how important that was to kind of pave the way forward for Tom Welling. So like that in and of itself completely devastated me. But the trailer is just we say this thing all the time that it could always be worse, right? And that's a tagline that I think a lot of us really take for granted, that it could always be worse, right? Or in this case, you literally had a man that based his entire life off of perseverance. You had, when he was cast as Superman, he took that role head on. He became a beacon. He became an icon for so many people, and then that tragedy happened to him, and he chose to turn that tragedy into something beautiful, and he chose to live his life in the fullest that he could, right? And we underestimate what having the power of love, what having the power of family is, having the power of hope is, like what that means to somebody, right? I mean, there were so many lines in that trailer, like you so eloquently said, where he was like, I don't even know if I want to live anymore, right? Like, imagine somebody that's a Superman fan and they hear that line, right? And
Yeah.
it just God, like it just broke me, And I think the other thing that I wanted to showcase too is how much respect I have for James Gunn,
Mm,
who bought the distribution rights to this documentary. So this could be the first live action feature under the DC Studios banner. And not only that, he's putting Christopher Reeve's son in the Superman movie, Will Reeve,
mm-hmm.
who probably has a prominent presence in the documentary in and of itself. But
Sure.
this documentary, we're going to talk about what the actual, Superman the movie in and of itself. But the tagline of "You'll believe a man can fly," you'll believe a man can cry. watching,
Yeah.
watching,
Yeah.
watching this
Yeah,
documentary.
for sure.
Um,
And
yeah,
just to echo what you said about James Gunn and DC Studios, the internet is certainly a thing, and it's certainly a place. And when the trailer dropped and the DC Studios logo appeared in front of it, certain accounts from a certain fan base tried to insinuate that James Gunn was using Christopher Reeve to sort of prop up his new DC Studios and DC account, and it's like, no, you morons! It's paying respect and doing the right thing for a man that is so synonymous with the character. I mean, sure, Amazon could have bought this documentary. Apple could have bought this documentary. But it just feels appropriate that it's DC Studios and Warner Brothers that is distributing this. And the fact that people around the world are going to get to see this wonderful man's incredible story brought to life
yes,
is the most important part about it. And would these accounts rather have it not been purchased and not seen the light of day just so that the DC Studios logo doesn't appear in front of it?
hmm
It's just the stupidity. Like you can't go a day without honoring the legacy of an honorable, noble man who went above and beyond the character he played and made real change in people's lives because you're bitter over a version of the universe that you like is no longer continuing. Like, get over yourselves.
yeah,
And stuff like that just aggravates me.
yes,
Because, again, not this isn't going to turn into a James Gunn love fest, but in addition to buying this documentary and being so kind and welcoming and sort of in tune with Christopher Reeve's family and sort of letting them know what's going on in regards to what he's doing with Superman, he also donates to charities.
right,
Like we through Guardians, he did a lot for the. Remember, he was donating for the
Yep.
raccoon foundation. So
Yeah.
it's not like the guy is doing. In addition to making these awesome movies that we love to consume and go see, he's doing his part to try and make the world a better place. And it's just
Yes.
like just to throw negativity and shade, again, just because certain people are miserable that their favorite version of the DC universe is no longer continuing. Go away.
Yeah.
Just go away.
No,
Is
no place for that. Yeah.
like it's a whole new level of ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to let that tarnish what should be the honoring of the fantastic Christopher Reeve.
Yeah.
And so I hope, whether it be in the theater or purchasing it once it hits VOD platforms,
Mm-hmm.
see this film and understand the full story of the wonderful man that was
Yeah.
Christopher Reeve. But that's pretty much
Oh,
all.
real quick. Yeah. Did you before I cut you off too? I did want to bring this up. I think this is pretty cool too. Did you also hear that James Gunn actually showed the documentary to the cast while filming
That's
Superman?
pretty. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So imagine having that as like a blueprint, as an inspiration
Yeah,
to David Cornswhite, who's trying to be the new successor to this iconic role, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah,
again, like if you want another reason to root for the movie, I mean, I think that's a pretty good one.
yeah. It's like I said, it's a.
That broke me even more.
I
Yeah,
mean, like the character in and of itself, pre Christopher Reeve, is an awesome character and has wonderful ideals and values and and all that jazz.
yeah,
My first Superman was Lois and Clark, so it wasn't even the Christopher Reeve version that got me in the door.
right,
But you add Christopher Reeve's, not only his portrayal, but then you add his story again post accident, and it really is carrying on the mantle of this character is a different level because of how wonderful that man not only played the role, but carried himself afterwards.
yeah,
That is sort of now the tradition. And I'm not saying everybody has to, start a foundation for a cause to play Superman. What I'm saying is Christopher Reeve, again, take away the accident for a second. He always portrayed himself, even pre-accident, in a manner that was upholding the legacy of Superman. Like when he spoke, from all accounts, when he met people, there was this understanding of okay, people, whether it's tough on an actor or not. Once you play that role, people see you as that character, right? So you have to behave a certain way that he felt, and Brandon Routh felt the same way. You have to behave in a certain way that is befitting of that character. And even again, just so people don't accuse me of hating, even Henry Cavill in public when he's around kids knows that he has to act a certain way because kids see him as Superman.
right,
He said that as well. So there is a sort of standard, and that is large part because of the person Christopher Reeve was. And so, the impact he had, and I'm like I said, glad the cast got to see that because I think
yeah,
it just, I think it spurs them on and it gives an added sort of uh, determination to do the best job possible, added drive, right, to do the best job possible. So I'm looking forward to the film. Not looking forward to the way it makes me cry, but
yeah,
that's just par for the course. And once we've both seen it, we'll obviously do an episode talking about the documentary
yes,
uh, uh, and what we thought of it. So stay tuned for that. But we'll take a quick break because that's all all the news we have. And on the other side, we will discuss that first groundbreaking live-action Superman film from 1978, which starred Christopher Reeve. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
What's up, everyone? It's the Emerald Enthusiast. For all of your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows, which include Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Power Rangers, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast. You can check us out on Podbean, and remember to subscribe right here on YouTube. That's the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. From the first podcast to the last.
And we're back, and as promised, we are going to revisit the Superman the movie from 1978. So just some personal background of my sort of history with this movie. Obviously, I didn't see it in theaters because I wasn't born yet. I wasn't on this earth at the time of its release, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because I would have liked to see this in the theater. But I'm also still, it keeps me a little bit younger than I would have been if I had been born by the time and old enough to go to the theater to see this movie. Not that I'm saying if you were that you're old. I'm just saying I'm slightly younger than you. I saw this in look. Probably as a child, I saw it in bits and pieces on TV. I'm not going to dispute that probability because it probably happened. But I was more sort of tuned out to it because when I was like the age range of 4 through 8, I was consumed with Batman, Zorro, He-Man, and the Ninja Turtles. If you weren't one of those 4 or 5 things, like, you didn't register on my radar of fan sort of things. Like fan, like, you know, the sci-fi superhero entertainment. As I've said many times, my intro to Superman was Lois and Clark. Fast forward to 2000, I think it was summer 2001, when we started getting those commercials for Smallville. And I've told the story before, but I'll reiterate it. I kept seeing a commercial. It was Tom Welling sitting in, I guess, an actor's cast member chair. And it was in a Talon set, and the commercial consisted of him saying, "Hey, come and watch my new show, Smallville, on whatever night it was going to be on." And it would like, they would show it 3 or 4 times like during every hockey game, and I'd get annoyed because I'm like, all right, enough of this, just get back to the game. But something kept sticking out at me through that commercial, and I'm like, Smallville, like, where do I recognize that name? Like, this is before I got back into comics, so I'm like, why is that name sticking to me? And then, like, the 4th time in one night that I saw that commercial, I'm like, wait a minute, that's Superman. And I guess at the time they were doing a re-release of, remember those 2-sided laser discs?
Mm-hmm.
Like the pre-DVD thing? Those were coming out for Superman the movie.
Right, yeah.
And I saw it at Walmart, so I bought it. And so that was the first time, really, that I watched the movie from start to finish. So probably 2000/2001. In anticipation of the Smallville thing that I kept hearing about.
Mm-hmm.
And instantly, when I watched that movie, I fell in love with it. Like, from that moment. And so, again, I just want to, it just goes to show that, yes, I came to this adaptation of Superman later. But it stuck with me just the same. And his performance, and so many things of the movie, from the movie, sticks out to me, which we'll get into in greater detail. But I just
Hmm.
wanted to say how I came to the movie, uh, and that was my kind of story. What was your sort of first introduction?
Yeah, I saw this at a very young age. I can't exactly pinpoint when I did. All I really remember is that I was introduced this at a really young age, right around the time where I started discovered Batman '89 for the first time, Batman Returns, Batman Forever. I kind of like watched all that at a relatively. I was probably had to be about 6 or 7. I think was probably around that time I discovered Superman the movie on top of, because I was into Batman, so of course I got to be in the Superman, or Superman's got to be next, right? Um, and I remember just being completely enamored at Christopher Reeve's portrayal, even like at that young age. At that time I was still getting engrossed in the Superman the animated series. Like you, I saw Lois and Clark, the Adventures of Lois and Clark before I went to school. In grade school, I had Smallville, so there was all these different kind of portrayals
Mm.
of the character that I had growing up, and then I think as I continued to get older, there was always more fascinating things, like you said, like his accident being a huge part of the history of Superman and Smallville. There were things of like the writer of The Godfather wrote the movie of Superman the
Yeah,
movie,
yeah,
because at the time, again, this was 1978, so they weren't focused on exactly making comic book movies, but they put comic book elements, and I guess let's call it like a feature film, right? Which is why the movie, I don't really buy. Like, I always hate this saying where it's like, oh, you weren't there at the time, you were too young to remember. To me, the movie's the movie. It doesn't really matter what age you really see the movie at. The movie's gonna either affect you or it's not, right? So I think,
yeah. The movie by
yeah,
itself ultimately
right,
will stand on its own. I mean, there probably is an element of what was the
sure,
buzz like.
right,
What was it like to be in that you know time period when the movie, all the hoopla surrounding the movie, right?
right.
It's what we get caught up in modern days when when the Avengers came out, the hoopla. So it is a different aspect when you're in it, as
Right.
opposed to, for example, me watching it when I was, let's see, 2000. Let's say 2000 for shits and giggles, just to be
Yeah.
even. That was 24 years ago.
Yeah. So
So
we
I would
probably
have
might
been.
have seen it around the same time. We were just a little bit older,
So
obviously.
I
Yeah.
was, let's see, I was 17 when I
Mm-hmm.
saw it. Holy jeez, 24 years ago. Good God
Yeah. So I
Almighty,
was. Yeah. So
Christ,
yeah.
I'm old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But so it's different from my perspective. Like, I don't know what kids were or younger adults that were into Superman in 1978 were feeling. Like, I'm sure it was a special experience. I wish, part of me wishes I had a time machine so I could relive that,
Yeah.
just to see what it was like. But we're not going to know that. All we can know is how the movie affects us when we watch it. I think luckily for both of us, it still holds up incredibly well. One of the interesting things, Chris, that I think we need to sort of talk about is again, you're talking about Mario Puzo writing this treatment for what it was going to be 1 and 2,
Yes.
and it was like what, some 500, 600 page
Mm-hmm.
script that was going to be broken up into two, and then it was once Richard Donner came on board, he brought in Tom Mankiewicz to kind of refine it and make it more uh, accurate, comic accurate, as best they could. Given again, when you talk about comic accuracy, you have to a degree, understand. Okay, what were the comics like at the time? And sort of. So when you say comic accuracy, you kind of have to frame it in that sense, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
of how accurate it was to the time, right? Um, for example, like if you look at Batman '66, sure, that was probably accurate to the comics that were 5 or 10 years before the show came to the screen. So you could say that it was comic accurate for the time. Watching that in 2024, you say, well, is that comic accuracy? Well, if you go look at the comics now, No, Batman is I mean, obviously there are things that are the same, just because those are integral to the character. But the tone and tenor is very different. Just like with Superman, right? Like it's core essential elements are there in Superman 78, but Lex Luthor doesn't have a hard on for land. He's got other concerns. So, and he doesn't live below the train terminal, right? So when you say comic actor, you have to preface of at the time, and so that's what Tom Mankiewicz was brought in to do, kind of, make it more classic Superman. But if you look at the way they constructed this movie, with a premise of, okay, we're going to get an unknown in Christopher Reeve, and then surround him with top tier names. And the reason I think they did that was to legitimize the whole thing, because up until that point, the comic book movie genre as we know it today was not a thing.
Right.
This is the movie that makes it allowed to be a thing today. So you get a guy like Marlon Brando for Jor-El, Gene Hackman for Lex Luthor, Jackie Cooper for Perry White, Glenn Ford for Pa Kent. You do all this casting again. So for the general audience, it legitimizes what you're trying to do. What you're telling the general audience at the time is, this is not a kid's cartoon. This is a real movie. Come watch it.
Right.
Like, this is not going to be like the 40s, the 30s and 40s serials where we have a live action guy, that then turns into a cartoon flying around. This is a legitimate movie, right? So I think the reason they cast it the way they did, and the reason why they advertised, from the writer of The Godfather or whatever, because that kept getting brought up, is to legitimize the whole production, right? So it's very important to categorize that, because I think the superhero movie genre has gotten to a place today where if the property is big enough, like a Superman, like a Batman, like a Spider-Man, you don't need to pepper it with that casting strategy, right? So, for example, the Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies,
Boom.
the most notable guy in that is Willem Dafoe, right? The biggest name is Willem Dafoe. Again, at the time, is Willem Dafoe, right? So, like, you see the difference of where it got to, you know what I mean? And now, if you look at it now, like, even the more obscure characters, like Guardians of the Galaxy,
right?
Like,
look at 2000's X-Men.
Chris Pratt at the time was well, 2000 X-Men was still in that phase of, we have to cast big stars, like.
Wow, yeah. Well, you had McKellen and Stewart.
So it was still, but Jackman was unknown. But
Halle Berry didn't peak yet.
Right, but they had those two guys that everybody knew, like,
sure.
That had that known come on. So it was still in that mix. And even Nolan, like, tried to mimic Superman the movie strategy when he cast Batman Begins, right? But once we got to Spider-Man, Spider-Man was the start of the shift, where it's like, the property will sell itself if the movie's good. We don't need to rely on. But it's interesting to go back and see how the way they did it. Whereas, the Superman was the unknown, and then everybody else was a name surrounding him, right? So I think that is an interesting aspect of it. But in just before we get into the nuts and bolts of the actual movie, could you imagine, like, if you think back, and because we've watched the documentary, we know all the names that they went through Dustin Hoffman,
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone, uh, Robert Redford.
Wasn't Robert Redford? Yeah.
Yeah. Could you, look,
I think he
trying
was
to.
the main choice, actually.
Yeah, could you? And then there was Ilya Salkind's dentist,
Mm-hmm.
who was in consideration. Because that's how far and wide they were looking. But could you imagine looking back and I can't picture Sylvester Stallone or Dustin Hoffman in that role, because all it would be is, oh look, there's Sylvester Stallone in a Superman costume.
Right.
There's Dustin Hoffman in the Superman costume.
Mm-hmm.
There's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Goes on and on.
Right.
I think with the character of Superman, for whatever reason, the idea of getting an unknown is still the best. A relative unknown is still the best option.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever, I don't know why that is, but it just worked. Whereas with Batman, everybody knows who Robert Pattinson is.
Right.
But nobody says, "Oh, that's just Robert Pattinson wearing a Batman costume."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So it's a very different ball of wax. Nobody says, "Hey, that's Robert Downey Jr. wearing an Iron Man suit." Nobody says that. They just look at it and say, "Okay, that's Tony Stark," right?
Mm-hmm.
And they buy it. With Superman, it seems that it has to be the unknown, or it's a harder sell. And that is the rare tradition that is still maintained, is that whoever they get as Superman, with the exception of Nicolas Cage's cameo in The Flash, it is an unknown. And even that, for example, that was cool to see given the context of, hey, we almost had this movie, but it didn't get made, but here's a nod to it. But by the same token, even in 1997, when that was first, when the casting was announced, I'm like, Nicolas Cage is what? Right? So I'm not going to pretend that I was okay with it. That was weird back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And watching a full movie with him as Superman would probably be weird. It was literally fun for about a minute that we saw it in The Flash. But do I want it for 2.5 hours? Probably not. But I know Chris Evans does, because he likes.
Yeah.
He loves Nicolas. Again, I got nothing against Nicolas Cage. I'm looking forward.
Superman lives.
I'm looking forward to Spider Noir. I think he's going to do great in that.
Yes.
But I don't know. Again, for me, the tradition of Superman being cast as or the cast filled out with an unknown actor, for whatever reason, it's still to this day the tried true method, and it works. And David Cornsworth certainly falls into that relative category. And again, the cast was stacked. I think everybody did a solid job with the material they were given.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that is my preferred version of Lex Luthor, but for what he was required to do, Gene Hackman did great with what he was required to do. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's not my favorite Lex Luthor. I'll tell you that right now. In the pantheon of Lex Luthor actors, Gene Hackman is not my favorite. That's Michael Rosenbaum. But I can appreciate his performance because he did the best he could with what he was given. He was told to play it that way, and that's what he did. So all the actors, again, the only other unknown, I think, besides Reeve, was in a key role was Margot Kidder. I think the rest were at least known commodities. They weren't all necessarily superstars, but they were known commodity. I mean, Brando and Hackman were the superstars, and then but the others were known commodities. What I think is so endearing and still stands out about this movie is the structure of it, where it's a very straightforward. We started on Krypton. We transitioned to Smallville and then transitioned to Metropolis. Like it's very, very much. And I think most movies of that era were of that formula. There wasn't, like today, 1 minute we're starting in present day, and then there's a flashback in between, like abruptly in the middle. Like Batman Begins was like narratively was all over in terms of Bruce Wayne's trajectory was hopping back and forth, right? This was very linear, right? And that influence, I think, carried for a long time. Like, even if you look at the MCU movies, I think still to this day, correct if I'm wrong, but they all are pretty much in that mold of that 3-act structure that Superman the movie had. But it works so well, and the transitions from each locale, which represents a part of Superman's life, were so easily accessible to people, and that's what I think still draws you in. At least to my thought process.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about Krypton for a second, I'm of two minds about it, because I love the visual aesthetic of the crystal sort of world and the buildings and all that jazz, like the domes and all that. So I love the aesthetic of it. But I remember when I watched it when I was younger, and even to this day, I'm wondering, I'm like, where the hell do they sit? Like,
where do they eat?
Where's the dinner table? I mean, like the council's there when the council is talking. Like, this is after they sentence General Zod and his two cronies. They're talking about the end of, Krypton is doomed and blah blah blah. And nobody's saying, I'm like, you guys just stand all the time, nobody sits. But then, and again, it's a trivial thing to see, but it's notable because it's like, well, like legitimately, do you guys stand 24/7? Like, what's going on? And the funny thing is, on the rewatch last night, there are little stunts that I assume are prospective seats when the council is talking with Jor-El. So they could have had them sitting down if they chose. But for whatever reason they were. But I always wondered as a kid, like, where the hell do they sit? Where the hell do they eat? Like, what? So that's always been a sort of, like, it looks cool, but it's like, how practical is this? Like, where are the doors? Is everything just open? Like, do they all trust each other? Like, and then, like, if you see when Jor-El is like preparing the baby's pod, it's like, well, okay, it lifts off, and to get out into the atmosphere, it has to break the ceiling, and I'm like, well, again, I know the world's ending, so it doesn't matter. But let's assume the world wasn't, all those years that the world wasn't ending. How the hell did they get in and out of their house? These are all so, like I said, aesthetically it looks cool and it looked very alien and foreign, but practicality, it's like, I don't know if that works for me. But it's an interesting thing that you think about. But I will say, the scenes with the three criminals, that did feel very, like, I love that and I think it was done on purpose. They made it very cold, very sterile. To kind of give the sense of, like, you're going into the end, like, this is what you have to look forward to, the endless void. and it's going to be very much so. They sold that really well with the way they they laid that all out, and the cinematography and all that, and even like the Phantom Zone itself and the way it sort of, again, it's the glass kind of entrapment thing. Yeah, I'd get it. Like if you put yourself in the headspace of the villains. If you're I mean, imagine being claustrophobic and seeing that thing coming to like envelope you and like entrap you. Like that would be a horrible punishment if you're somebody that's claustrophobic. So like I bought it. I'm like, yeah, that would be. I could see how that would be terrifying. Endless void, being trapped in this thing. Like I could be. I could be disturbed and traumatized by that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought what you'll notice is in the 3-act structure, the stuff on Krypton is very Shakespearean, biblical, kind of the way they speak, the way they articulate, and even the speech that Jor-El gives as he's preparing the ship and he says goodbye to baby Kal-El. I mean, that's such an iconic speech. And what I took away from it on this rewatch, it's very, very subtle and very subdued, but you can see it. Jor-El's doing all the talking. But if you watch in Susanna York, who played Lara's facial expressions and her eyes, you could see the pain of having to surrender her child and send them off into the unknown.
Yeah.
So it wasn't expressed verbally, but I thought she did a very good job of selling that idea. What did you think of the Krypton sequences?
Yeah, the characterization of Krypton, the destruction of the characterization of Krypton is always something that I seemingly always have some issues with, because I think in this particular version, you're wholeheartedly spot on, where it's very practical for sure, and I think it's meant to the horrifying nature of the destruction, which go figure, because it's the guy who directed The Omen, so you would think that there would be some horrifying elements to the destruction of Krypton, but to me, it's always like every time we watch, any sequence of Krypton, it always just feels like the only people that really matter are Clark or Kal-El, I guess, in this sense, right? Because every single sequence we see it outside of Man of Steel that showcases that Krypton's worth fighting for. Every sequence we get with the destruction, it's always like these are bad people. They're not. They're not really the nicest people. That the planet's gonna die, but it's like we don't really ever spend enough time to really fully care. So when this came out, it was really the purpose was to just get Kal-El Clark out of there, right? And to show that the horrifying nature of the destruction of the planet itself. Because I'm wholeheartedly with you, where it's like every time I watch it, that's really the one takeaway I have, where it's I don't feel anything when Krypton explodes. I care about how Clark gets kind of like to Earth, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So yeah, it's like I said, visually it works.
Yes. Visually, it's good. Yeah,
and the destruction of the planet does look harrowing, and does look um, um, does look traumatizing.
Yeah.
But like everything around it, like the just the day-to-day stuff, especially, and I think the problem is, and it's not a problem, it's just a fact. Um, um, seeing other adaptations of Krypton
Mm.
where it's more, it still has that sci-fi alien quality,
Mm-hmm.
but the practicality of day-to-day life, or what would be day-to-day life, is better articulated, better displayed. I think kind of changes your opinion on the way this Krypton is shown. Uh, by contrast, I thought the Smallville stuff all works.
Yeah.
My only sort of negative for the Smallville stuff is the fact that I think it was too short.
Mm.
Because he lands, we have him, um, we have him in high school. Like we see, uh, he's basically the equipment guy for the football team. He's picked on by a couple of kids. Like he has a little flirtation with Lana.
Mm-hmm.
Then he runs home, and his dad gives him the speech, right? I do think the really cool thing that they did show that we do get to see is the super speed by the train sequence. That was really well done, and even the effect of the super speed for back in the day looked really, really good.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of looking to see if I can notice. Okay, did they slip up? Like, can we see the wires?
Can we see? Yeah.
But you can't, which is great.
Yeah.
So I thought that looked spectacular. And then the death of the father. I thought even in that short scene where they have that conversation of what he should be doing with his powers. It's short, but it's strong enough that when Glenn Ford as Jonathan Kent collapses, and you realize that he's died, it is really moving. And what works about it is that it's so abrupt and out of nowhere that it's something that Clark, even with all his powers, as he talks about, there was nothing he could do because it was so sudden and so, unpredictable. And I like that, as opposed to like there's a clear distinction of this is a human frailty that nothing I can do can stop. Like heart, he can't stop the heart issue. If you're going to kill off the Kents, which I hope in 2025 we don't get.
No.
But if you're going to do it, I think it behooves you to do it in a way where it's something that Clark can't control. Because if you make it something that he can combat against, but then he does nothing, that's when problems potentially arise. Circa 2013, but we're not going to go there. But so, like I said, it was a short moment between the two, but it sold not only the relationship between adopted father and son, and it also sold the fact that this was something that Clark, with all his abilities, couldn't stop no matter what. And then he's up and the other sequence that I did like that again for 1978 was done flawlessly was young Clark. I guess he was 2, 3-ish at the time.
Left out that truck.
When the truck was going to fall on Jonathan, and he lifts it up. That was very, very well done, like expertly done.
Yes.
So I want to shout out those two moments. But then again, and so then after the death, he pretty much is like, all right, I'm going. Like he gets the glow, the green glow, and he hears the sound from the crystal from the ship, or the remnants of the ship, and it's off to the north he goes. So again, it was all too short, and Martha really didn't have much to do here.
Yeah.
But again, I liked what we saw. I just wished it was longer from my point of view. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I think that the Smallville stuff for me is always like it's simple. It's not enough, like you said, but it's still effective. Right? Like it gets you from that point A to B. Right? Like it does what it needs to do. I think the calming like atmosphere of being in Smallville, like like when he's in the farm and
Mm-hmm.
it just has like a calming atmosphere to it, like when he's there and kind of things like that. Um, I am with you on 100% though on the portrayal of Jonathan Kent, because that's the interesting thing that whenever we when we point out to the tropes in comic book movies, right, where it's the main protagonist has to go through some sort of loss because that sort of propels them on their journey to becoming a hero, right? Where it's we got into this evergreen thing of every characterization of Superman. His father has to die, right, or his father has to pass away, right? And that's the thing that I'm like, I've never been of the mindset that he needs to lose his dad in order for him to become Superman. I always like it that it's
I agree.
let's 18 or 21 he gets the calling, then he needs to go to the North Pole, and that he needs to begin his training as Superman. I'd always like kind of like want something like that. That's not to say that what we got though wasn't very moving and emotional and effective, like you said too. But I am with you. I don't think we spent enough time for that relationship to build, right? Like he goes immediately from being a baby and then he's in high school, showing off, for Lana. So it is kind of a big time jump. I did get emotional when he finally has to hug Martha before he goes
Sure.
away, because we're led to believe that that's the last time he sees his mom. At least that's the last time I
That's the
think we
last
saw
time we see her.
Martha.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But then like there's the cool part where it's like, he sends the checks over to the farm, where he tells Perry, send half my paycheck over to this address, and you're like, oh, so he's sending it to the farm. But yeah, no, I'm with you on the Smallville stuff. For sure, it gets us to where we needed to go. But I don't think we spent enough time in there, as much as we got some cool effects in Smallville.
Yeah. No, like I said, I really love the stuff with the father. I thought it was great.
Yes.
Again, the hug with Martha was emotional, but it's not. Again, she had more to do when the baby was still present.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. They both did. Yeah.
like when that was her time to shine. So that makes the moment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, that makes the moment more powerful when he hugs her. Like so, it's not that she had nothing to do. It's just um, um, I kind of wish that there was more between the teenage Clark and his mother
Mm-hmm.
to sort of like foster that and really make it hit home. Um, so that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it was like that part of it was bad. I'm just saying I wished it was more.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff in the fortress, he goes up north. That's all fine and good. And then he throws the crystal into the water, and then the fortress is formed, and it's really interesting because you actually see like the crystals growing and forming,
Mm-hmm.
and it just shows you how like sometimes your earlier watches kind of like get mixed up and you forget that things actually happen. So I had always assumed, like for previous rewatches, that when there are moments where it's like all you see is black.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was when that's all you see of like after he throws the thing, and
Mm-hmm.
then poof, the fortress is there. But like on this rewatch, for whatever reason, I actually noticed the crystals. Like you see the actual formation of it. So that
Very
was
cool.
kind of like it's kind of cool that I noticed that on second, or not second, but like 40-second rewatch, whatever it is. Probably more than that in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I always thought the fortress was bigger, but it's like at least on the outside. But it's not, and I think the reason why I'm getting it confused is because I'm getting it confused with the Smallville / Superman Returns one, which were shown as bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just some good cool thing I noticed. And then like we get in the fortress, and again he puts one of the crystals in the console, and Jor-El's disembodied sort of Zordon head appears. This was Jor-El was doing the Zordon thing before Zordon was a thing.
The blueprint.
yeah. See what I mean? Superman in the movie is the blueprint for multiple things, not just the superhero movie genre. I really love the sort of this interaction, like the way this was sort of done, because Marlon Brando, say what you will about him, and the fact, sure, he read off cue cards or whatever, but the performance he delivers is like you're instantly drawn in and like want to listen to what he has to say. Like you know whatever he's gonna, like the way he talks, the way he delivers it, like you know it's gonna be something important. I'm still not 100% sure why they just didn't keep on the talking head and the Jeff East at the time, who was playing young Clark. Why they didn't keep that back and forth the whole time instead of going through this space kind of montage. Like I didn't understand why the transition was happening. Like I didn't get it. I guess to show the passage of time, but
yeah.
But it was like, okay, couldn't you have just like, I don't know, done it a different way? And then like the whole my issue with the thing I found weird. Again, not a bad thing, but it was like 3/4 of the speech was like the camera panning through that like all like how I would have done it was for 90% of the time have it on Marlon Brando and Jeff East, and then when he shows him Krypton, that's when you sort of go through the void of space, and then come back and it's Christopher Reeve in costume. So I would have decreased the amount of just zooming through space that we had, but like the dialogue, all that jazz was great. It was all great, and then the fly through of the first fly through of Christopher Reeve, it was just effortless, and it's like there was a quiet, almost grayish, to it that made it more majestic. And it's to me speaks to the skill of using wires and practical, as opposed to over relying on CGI. What were your thoughts on the Jor-El stuff?
I'm with you. I thought it was very well executed too. I didn't. I think you make a very interesting point too. I think the immediately jumping into space while he was there, I think was probably just meant to show you that he was there for a set period of time, right? Because you're led to believe he's there when he's a teenager, and then he leaves as a full grown adult. Like how old he is, I don't think is really established. I know when we get to a later scene, he just says that he's over 21. So let's just say for practical purposes, he's between the ages of 25 and 30 for intents and practical purposes. But I am with you. I think it probably would have been a little bit more effective if you had shown more of their conversation, and then eloquated with the passage of time that way. But we like we kind of said too. We're still in like that mid 70s where maybe production and things like you can do on film are still a little bit limited, so they kind of had to do it like a certain way. But I still think what we got was largely effective. And I think the best part, arguably the coolest part, is once we see Christopher Reeve in that flyby, The rest of the movie's magic from here.
Yeah.
It's just all systems go.
The only thing now, just sticking on Jor-El for a minute, because we're gonna get more into just more of the Superman. But as Superman, there's one more time where he goes to Jor-El and talks to Jor-El,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of, it's a moment where, so, it's a moment where he's like it's the montage of rescues, I guess we'll call it.
Mm.
Where so he does all the rescue. We'll talk about it more specifically, but the point is, he goes back, talks to Jor-El, and tells him how good it felt. And there's a great speech by Jor-El where he's like, like, don't feel bad for enjoying what you did, right? Being able to do what you can do and helping people. But just be mindful of, you can't serve them all day, every day, 24/7. You have to allow them to be able to help themselves as well. That was a great part of it.
Yeah.
But it's like, and then he talks about, if it wasn't for the hubris of my fellow Kryptonians, I could have given you a hug right now and all that jazz, which I'm fine with. That's not my issue. My ultimate issue is how can this, and this is my issue with every friggin' adaptation. So it's not just this, but how can this recording of Jor-El, how could he have pre-planned for every friggin' conversation that they would have had? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how could he if he goes out and dresses up as becomes a superhero, he's going to want to ask me about this, and that. How could he have pre-planned for that? It's in it's every adaptation. I don't understand. How is he? What is he? The Wizard of Oz? The all-knowing Wizard? What is going on here? How does he know about all this? Like,
the all-knowing Jor-El.
I don't get it. Like, what's going on? So that's just a thing of mine that it bugs me a little bit, because even Russell Crowe's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, he's able to have, again.
Oh.
Ultimately, my question is, how do you know that your son is going to decide, well, you know what? I want to become a superhero. How do you pre-plan for that? So that you then have these pre-recorded answers. Like, I can imagine, like, listen, because he's his father, and because I'm sending him there as a baby, he's going to grow into a teenager. He's probably going to want to date men or women, whatever persuasion he wants to be. He's probably going to want to engage in certain activities. Let me record something about that. That I can understand. Not that I want to see it in the movie, but I can understand him pre-planning to have the birds of the bees talk with teenage Cal. I get it. Like, that you could pre-plan for. But how do you pre-plan for, you've decided to be a superhero? Cool. Let me tell you this, and this. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there was no crystal that brainwashed the baby Cal on the ship that when you become 30, your role in life is to become a superhero.
It's when he was in the ship.
Like, at some point, he has to make that decision himself. How would Jor-El know that he's going to make that decision?
Mm-hmm.
Unless he, like in Smallville, he pre-scouts Jonathan and Martha, and he's like, these people are going to raise him to the point where he's going to want to use his powers to help people.
Mm.
Then I could kind of, suspension of disbelief, all right, I'll buy it. But in this version, there was no talk about pre-scouting Earth in terms of, look, I found these particular parents for you. Like, Jor-El may have if they had said in the movie, okay, Jor-El wants him to be a superhero for Earth, like, because he says, you'll help them accomplish wonders. That's what he wants for him to do. But again, unless you've pre-scouted and, okay, these conditions will lead him to that, So I'm going to send them here, 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 and here. Unless you've done that, like in Smallville, there's no guarantee that he's going to come to that decision, so that you pre-plan all these friggin' recordings. It boggles my mind, and the only adaptation that's done it to a way that I can buy it and have it make sense in some sort of logic is the Smallville version.
Mm.
And so again, it's just my little nitpick. Again, it doesn't detract from the movie. It weirds me out that this guy, in the midst of his planet failing and ending, he decides, I'm going to record thousands of hours of material, and a bunch of the subjects I'm going to talk about is the rules for him to be a superhero. It's a thing for me that I can't get past. When we get to Metropolis, we really kick into the Superman portion here. I will say, in terms of the newsroom, it felt like a living, breathing, lived-in newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
Like the hustle and bustle.
The typewriter, the sound of the typewriting. Oh yeah.
The chaoticness of it all. It felt legitimate, like that was a real newspaper. So I like that. I really loved Jackie Cooper's iteration of F. Perry. Again, I'm going to use this terminology. It's the blueprint for J. Jonah Jameson, I think, or the way he would be portrayed in the films. I think J.K. Simmons took it to that level that was in the cartoon, but actually, let me rephrase that. I think what I meant to say is I think the version of J. Jonah Jameson kind of inspired them to alter Perry White to be more of that. Because from what I remember from the George Reeves series and the early comics, I don't think Perry White was the screaming, the loud, boisterous type. I think it played different, and then it was this movie and then onward that played him as the more loudmouth, energetic, boisterous, yelling kind of editor. So I think the J. Jonah Jameson character had an influence on the Perry White character, not the other way around. But I love the way Jackie Cooper played him. Christopher Reeve is in the Clark Kent persona. I've said it once, I'll say it every time I talk about this movie. He really sells that Clark and Superman are two different people. And it's not necessarily in the look, because you can tell that it's just a different parting of the hair and glasses. Like, there's no denying that if you look at their face long enough, man, these two guys look similar. But it's just the vocal tone and the way he carries himself, like physically, that sells the transition. And he did that so wonderfully well. Because the way he's bumbling around the Daily Planet from the moment he gets there, once Superman comes on the scene, I don't think, if nobody made the connection, if average Joe Blow doesn't make the connection that this guy and Superman are one and the same, I buy it. Now, Lois is a different ball of wax because she's with Clark day in and day out, and then she has a certain close proximity to Superman that she should at some point figure it out. But the average person, the average reporter that passes in the hallway of the Daily Planet, like if they didn't figure it out, I totally buy that. Mm-hmm. And he sells it so well. What do you think?
Oh no, I mean I think it was imperative, and this is why it was so crucial to have found somebody that can differentiate, Superman and Clark Kent right off the bat. Because if you get the wrong person, then it comes off as gimmicky, right? It comes off as goofy. Yeah. But what made Christopher Reeve so iconic was that you're totally right. His tonal pitch was different. His posture was different. The way that he carried himself was different. He was more cackling. He was more bumbling, right? He mumbled over his words a little bit while he was Clark Kent. But then when he's Superman, he's confident as a cucumber, right? Where, he is Superman. And under the wrong hands, just totally could have went catastrophic.
And I like Mark McClure as Jimmy. I thought he did a fantastic job. Yes. Like that. I mean, Jimmy is very consistent in the comics, and this is like on brand for the character. Mm-hmm. It's done very well. Look, I like Margot Kidder as Lois Lane. She's not my all-time favorite Lois. The one issue that I constantly have with her Lois, and again, it's not her fault, it's the way it was written. I don't understand why the live-action media, and this has become a thing ever since I think Superman the movie, has to have the running joke that she can't spell worth a damn. I don't get it, because she's an award-winning journalist. She can write a great article, but she can't spell worth a damn. Like, really? Like, this is what we're going with? I like her drive. I like the way she'll ask the questions that need to be asked. Like, all that worked. But then you contrast that with every time Perry looks at an article, oh, this word is spelled wrong. That word is spelled wrong. Right? Like, it's not a trope that writers put to the character that I like. Mm-hmm. So I hope James Gunn does away with that when it's his turn. Because Superman Returns did the same thing.
Yeah.
Smallville made allusions to it. Maybe Superman and Lois hasn't done it, but I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I don't think so.
So maybe they're on the right track there. But I hope... And I can't remember if Lois and Clark did it. I mean, they were always in the office, so...
Yeah.
I mean, so there have been a couple that haven't done it, and I appreciate the ones that haven't done it, because if she's supposed to be the best reporter that the Daily Planet has, and she can't spell the alphabet, I'm sorry, I have issue. But I like Margot Kidder's Lois Lane. Like, again, it's not my all-time favorite portrayal, but I like it. And she does have good chemistry with Reeve. I will say that.
Yeah.
So I did love their chemistry. When you talk about the first appearance of Superman, I don't know that I could think of a better first appearance, like him saving Lois from the helicopter debacle on the roof, and then not only saving her, but her and the helicopter at the same time. I thought that was fantastic, and the build up to it, the anticipation, and the execution of it, like that. All these years later, like, we've had several Superman movies. I think there's only one scene that tops it, and it's the plane rescue from Superman Returns.
Yeah.
But these are like the top two live action movie Superman rescues and first appearances I've ever seen in media. And like I said, everything about the scene works, from the setup, the build to it, the music swelling at the right times, like the shirt rip and when he
Yep.
lifts off. And then even the people's reaction, because I remember when, and again, not shitting on the movie purposely, but I remember when Man of Steel was coming out, and certain people were like, see, this is how people would really react if Superman showed up. Okay, well, let's backtrack for a second. If you're about to watch this woman plummet to her death and fall and be squished like a pancake in front of you, but then miraculously some dude in a cape flies up and saves her, and the helicopter, I'm pretty sure that the onlookers there, the first thing they're going to do is start cheering, because not only did he save her, he subsequently saved their ass because he stopped the helicopter from falling. So I would assume their natural reaction would be to cheer, right? Just the euphoria of the street. On top of that, what does he do right after that? After he lets her down and tells her, she's like, who are you? And he's like, a friend, and he takes off. What does he do right after that? He continues stopping crime / saving things. Like, he saves Air Force One, he saves the cat out of a tree, and that poor girl gets slapped for telling the truth. I still don't know how that passed censors. By today's day and age, that wouldn't get past censors. But like, so he saves the cat, he saves Air Force One, he stops a jewelry heist, right? And the thieves on the boat, like he stops them, and that with a police shootout. So from that moment until the next morning when the news is reporting on it, all this guy's done is stop crime and rescue people. Why wouldn't the reaction be positive? Like, if the only thing you have to go on is, hey, this guy's helping people. Why would you be afraid of that? So I've never got the retroactive. Oh well, this is unrealistic because nobody would automatically cheer for something like that. But when you put it into context, all they have to go on is this guy's saving people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know all the different powers he has. They're not thinking, hey, one day this guy can get pissed off at humanity and torch us with his heat vision. They're not thinking that. All they have to go on is, look at all this guy for an entire night rescued things. So I thought that reaction was justified. Like, the people's reaction to it, I think, is justified in that scenario. Again, the montage of rescuing people, like, I get that certain people like when Superman's grimdark and looks like he's constipated, but in this montage of rescuing, like, the little like one-liners that he makes when the guy's falling, from the building, and he's like going down, and he catches him, and then when the other guy hits him with the crowbar, if only Jason Todd could have had the resilience of Superman. But when the guy hits him with the crowbar and he says, okay, and he starts shaking, and Superman looks at his like bad vibrations. Like, if you read some Superman comics now, he'll occasionally make those one-liners.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like that he does it, because it's like it just exudes the confidence that he has. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And again, we're talking about a guy that, going back to the Smallville scenes, his father's like, don't do this. Like, he does it outright, but he's like, try and be a little bit more discreet, right? So imagine all his life he has his parents saying, be discreet, be discreet, be discreet, but now he can help people. Of course he's going to enjoy that a bit. So I think him making those occasional one-liners, I think is appropriate. I didn't mind it at all. I don't know about you.
No, I mean, I just think the introduction of Superman in and of itself is one of the greatest pieces of just cinematic literature. I think put to screen. I mean, it's like even if you're not a big Superman fan, how can you not just like smile and like just feel joy watching the entire montage, right? I mean, like I even appreciate how like every save ultimately got bigger, right? Like he goes from saving, um, you know, an airplane, or excuse me, a helicopter, and then then it's a cat in a tree, then it's a jewelry thief, then it's then it's a boat, so it's like each one, and then ultimately the one at the end is jumping through time, right? So like each one ultimately got bigger and bigger. For Superman, you saw his confidence grow bigger and bigger. And it just like for me, it just puts a huge smile on my face, because that's just quintessential Superman right there, And it's
Yeah.
like even um, appreciating the fact that this actually kind of takes a page out of Batman Begins, or Batman Begins takes a page out of Superman 78's book, right? Where like by this point in the movie, we're well like into an hour and like
Yeah.
5 or 10 minutes, and we get to see Superman up until that point. Much like Batman Begins, like there was an hour without Batman, and then once you see him, that's all systems go too, right? And it's like
Right. Right.
it's like that build up to finally seeing Superman was so rich, right? Like you got Krypton, you got the destruction of Krypton, you got Smallville, and then from Smallville, then we're in Metropolis, and from Metropolis, then we're finally immersed into that world where now we built up to seeing Superman, right? Where it felt like a reward for like
Right.
for sticking with us. So I thought that was truly a
Yeah.
choice, even back
The
then.
payoff was worth it.
Yeah.
Um, I love the interview with Lois and Superman. I thought that was very well done. It's
Phenomenal.
very very sweet. Very a little cheeky too for the adults, but the rest we'll probably go over the kids' heads. But
That bro, you needed the little romance too, right?
right,
I think that's what they were. Yeah, you knew
yeah,
what they were going for.
it
Yeah.
works. It works, and but so I loved it, and I thought it was like again she asked the most pertinent questions.
Yeah.
And he's so trusting, and again, I think it's very important that they show this, is that there's one moment where he tells her, I'm sorry, I have a bit of an issue seeing through lead, right?
Mm.
And she writes that in the article. He doesn't stop and think, wait a minute, don't write that, because
Right.
like he's too trusting to say, yeah, sure, write whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't think that's going to come back to hurt him. It ultimately does, but again, it just shows you the trusting nature of Superman, that he thinks she can put that in the paper. Nobody's going to use that against me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way she gets all flustered and sort of enamored with him, I buy it. Like just because of the presence that he has, you would make even the smartest, hardened reporter that she's supposed to be, like go that way uh, towards him, especially if she was in love with him. So I bought all that. I thought them flying together was nice. Again, the John Williams score really aids that scene 100%.
Oof. Phenomenal.
I wish they didn't go with the inner monologue of her. Can you read my mind like that? I wish they would have kept out of it personally. It took me out of the scene for a second, but then they got right back into it, and
Yeah.
and it was fine. But and then again, when after he drops her off and leaves, Clark comes in, and it's such a contrast
Mm-hmm.
between Clark and Superman that again, I think it just sells the duality of the character. Like, and Christopher Reeve does the work there to sell it. So then we move on to Lex and the formation of Lex's plan. So what do I like about Lex? that he was intelligent enough to look at the interview and then read the interview and take pieces that would be pertinent to what he wanted to do, which was get Superman out of the way so he could complete his landscape. But it shows his intelligence of, okay, so if his planet exploded and it landed here X amount of years ago, debris would fall around here, and like he put a lot of it happens off screen, but the fact that he put all that together and discovered the kryptonite and etc. shows you how smart he is. So I like the intelligence of the character.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole plan of his ultimate plan of using the two missiles, I'd be like, you can't stop both. His thought process was, you can't stop both. You're going to have to make a choice. So that was all well and good. That's the stuff I like about Lex Luthor. The stuff that I can't fathom, and again, this has been, at least with the Reeve / Ralph movie, not so much in Man of Steel. In the Zack Snyder DCU, because they just got Lex wrong for 3/4 of the time, so that's a whole different ballgame. But for the Reeve Ralph version, I'll never understand why he, to put it in his own words, surrounded himself with complete idiots. Like, he's proven, what I just told you proves that he's smart. So if you want your plan to succeed, why would you surround yourself with people with the intelligence of Miss Tessmacher and Otis? Like, I don't get it. It kind of detracts from the threat of Lex Luthor shows that he's capable of being by surrounding himself with these fools. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. I mean, like, I think when you really look at it, that's the part of it. Like, I think that's the comic book elements kind of coming to what, where it's like every big supervillain has to have stupid henchmen.
yeah,
Right? Or henchmen, I guess. Whereas I think that's really what they were going for. Because I mean, really, like Ned Beatty's character grows more annoying by the second one. He's in the movie, great actor. Love. Don't have a problem with what he does, but it's like that's henchman 101, right? And Miss Tessmacher, again, is like the non-trusting assistant.
yeah.
But it's that trope of like once you see Superman, she becomes enamored with Superman, and then she betrays Lex, right? So it's like these are like the comic booky tropes that I think they inserted into the script, as annoying as they are in today's standards. Back then, it was just you have to you had to surround it. I think you had to put it that way.
Yeah.
I think.
It was like a trope. You're right.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I've never really liked that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Me neither.
It's like the Joker with Bob the Goon in '89. It's like,
Right.
He wasn't stupid. He was just.
Mm-hmm.
He felt like he was there just because he had to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, like, so again, his plot was smart. It was like he intended to kill Superman with the kryptonite, right? But he had a contingency in that if he somehow got free, he wouldn't be able to stop both rockets. He'd have to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, Miss Tessmacher, because once she realized her mother was in danger, decides I'll rescue him and make him, promise to save my mother first, which he does. He lives up to his promise. So he even accounted for if Superman gets loose. He can't. The idea was he can't stop both rockets.
Mm-hmm.
At least from Lex's perspective. When Superman does get loose, like I love that whole, like the chase with the rockets and having this to stop the one and then repair the damage from the other. Like, that was awesome stuff. The flight work was great in that. Like, again, you're watching a movie that was filmed in 1978.
Right.
I would say most of this was practical. The way they because CGI wasn't. I mean, it was rudimentary, like green screen, if you will, but it's not to where what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's not one aspect of those flights where he's saving the rockets or saving the San Andreas fault line, where I look at that and say, man, those effects look dated. Like, it still looks incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is how old? So
Yeah.
and again, it's like, it amazes me what they did with the budget they had, which was big for the day, but by comparison, would they have 58 million back in '78? And now they tell me they need 225 to make a solo Superman movie.
They make horror movies today for less than that.
Yeah, so it's just astounding, and it's like, if you look back, and I feel like I think this should be a lesson, and if you look at look at Superman the movie, you look at the Batman, which without factoring pandemic stoppages, that was supposed to be $100 million, and you look at what they did between practical and the volume technology that they have now, and even the new Beetlejuice. When you look at $100 million budget, but look at the sets were practical, the makeup was practical. I think this is a lesson, and I hope it's one that James Gunn took. And it seems like from the behind-the-scenes photos, he tried to go practical wherever he could.
Mm-hmm.
Where possible, go practical, because the visuals of this third act rescue from Superman from 1978 look phenomenal. And I've seen this movie. I've lost count of how many times.
Mm-hmm.
I was literally look, we have phones that are constantly beside us. I was watching this from my computer because I didn't want to go dig through my DVDs, so I watched the digital copy. But so I could have had tons of distractions at my disposal. I could have been on my phone. I could have, while watching it, because I've seen it so many times. But I was transfixed watching this third act, even though I've seen it countless times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's yes, part of it's the visuals, but it's also the music. The music. I was just enthralled by it. Still to this day, it's impressive.
Yeah.
Before we talk about what he decides to do, that is very contentious.
Mm.
What did you think of what I laid the third act? Chasing the rockets and.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm kind of with you too. Like I don't think Gene Hackman gives a bad performance by any stretch of the means. I think he gives a very admirable. I mean, he's Gene Hackman. I think he gives a very admirable performance as a Lex Luthor in a 1978 Superman movie, like for that time. I just think like the plot itself is I'm completely in agreement with you. It's like it's not like the plot is really anything of massive significance. It's very simple. I would say it's probably the weakest part of the actual movie, right? Where it's just real estate scheme. It's just overly contentious, pretentious rich guy that wants to destroy land so he can make it for himself. So what does he do? He uses 2 missiles to do it himself, and he directs our main protagonist to make a choice, ultimately deciding that he thinks he can win either way, right? So it's like the real estate scheme of it all is like, especially when you compare it to today's standards, like that wouldn't fly. Like that would completely disinterest anybody, right? But in 1978,
who's going to buy that damaged land? That's my thing.
Right. It's ultimately why by the time we got to 2006 and we got an incredibly immersive Batman movie, I think there's a reason why people didn't fall for the same thing twice. When you got something like Spider-Man 2 and Batman Begins, X-Men 2, right? Movies that gave you more stories to chew on, like more things of that nature. So, It still works, but like it is. I would say it is still the weakest part of the actual movie. I would say effects and everything like that aside, phenomenal. But I think the actual plot of it all is still what I have issues with.
Okay, yeah. Uh, the the like I said, I think we're in agreement. The mind over muscle aspect of the two
Yeah.
rockets and having to make a decision, great. The fact that it would give Lex Luthor some desirable real estate that he could then sell through the nose to people. It's like,
Right.
I don't buy that.
Mhm.
but yeah. The so in the aftermath of the rocket hitting the fault, Lois gets buried underneath rocks and rubble, and she suffocates to death, which was very disturbing to watch. Like even no matter how many times you see it,
Mhm.
man, that would be a horrible way to go.
Very.
Um, so then Superman realizes that he's too late; he couldn't save her, and then proceeds to turn back time through flying the opposite way around the Earth over and over at unbeknownst speeds to just a point, just enough where he'd done all he did before to repair the thing, but it gave him just enough time to save Lois and stop her from being submerged in the rubble. I wish they had found a different way to do that. Here's why. I hate when they get, first of all, on principle, any adaptation of Superman. I hate when they give him powers he doesn't have.
Mhm.
He doesn't have the power to time travel on his own. You want to give him a ring, a Legion ring that does that? Sure, I'll buy it. You want to have him make a deal with Jor-El to use one of the crystals to allow him to go back in time to save this one person like he did in Smallville, but then there are consequences somewhere else? Fine, I'll buy that. But this flying backwards business to turn back time, I don't buy it.
Mhm.
I don't like it, I don't buy it. Also, if he's going to fly back that far to save Lois, why not fly all the way back to before Jonathan drops in the farm and say, hey, go to the doctor and get yourself checked out to see if we can stop this heart attack from happening. Like, what's the stop? Like, where's the limit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
Jor-El even says on multiple occasions, you're forbidden to interfere with human history.
Right.
So I kind of like, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
If you give them that easy out. So that was, I think, the big out of all the faults of the movie. I think that was its biggest,
Yeah.
is making that decision.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, like that to me is actually what keeps this movie from being like that masterpiece, like greatest comic book movie of all time. Right, for me, is like the little things. Like we have to address them because we have to, right? It doesn't mean that we can't still enjoy everything else up until
Yeah,
like certain parts of a movie. Um, but like it does like even like in 1978, it kind of just feels like it's out of character, even for Superman, right? Like it's not something like, oh, he can turn back time. But then you're right, because like then you would think like the ripple effect that would cause. Which again, not knowing us at the time, because they had planned to make this back-to-back movie, so
yeah. I think there was ultimately a
reading
different
upon
ending.
it,
Yeah,
yeah, like the ripple effect was that because he did that, he actually released Zod and the other two
sure. Yeah,
out of the Phantom Zone. So I guess every action
yeah.
it did
There is
have a
a consequence.
reaction.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Okay.
us at the time, it was just he just wanted to save Lois Lane, and it felt like it was like a selfish
Yeah.
action for him to make even at that time, right? Because like he loved this woman, so he wanted to save her because he felt bad that he couldn't save her, right? But then you're right. Then it's like you do it for one person, so then why can't you do it for everybody
Yeah.
else? Right?
Like, where's the limit to
Yeah,
how far back you can go? If you can do
yeah,
that,
right, yeah. So I think that's the thing. Is like it just felt weird that up until like this perfect portrayal that we have gotten, that like now we introduce time travel, and I don't think to my knowledge we've ever seen that since then, right? I don't think we've ever seen that
so
live action since. Maybe we have, but
the flying backwards, you mean?
yeah, yeah,
That particular way of doing it, no. But we
yeah.
remember in Smallville,
Right, yeah,
Clark went to see. Remember
that's right.
when
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Lana died,
the
but
groundhog Day thing. Yeah,
yeah, but he went to the fortress and said, "Jor-El, help me."
yeah. Well, and he was warned, so yeah,
And it's
right.
like, fine, I'll give you the crystal that can do it, but
Yeah,
be
but
warned that somebody has to die.
right,
A life has to be taken to give this one
a
back.
life for a life. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a consequence. And then in the comics, there's either some device that can send them back or a Legion ring that can send them back. So
Right.
he has dabbled in time travel, but it's not, let me fly
Of his own
backwards.
doing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Then it just becomes, it's like anything that somebody does that he doesn't like or that he can't fix, well, yeah, just fly backwards.
Right.
Like where, my thing is, where's the limit?
Mm-hmm.
And nowhere did, in all those crystals that Jor-El recorded, nowhere did he say, "Well, here's the time travel power that you have." The only thing we got from Jor-El is, "Hey, you can't interfere in human history."
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah.
So that's the part of it that it's like you were told you can do this, but here you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and my thing is, just write a better scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Like save the Lois in peril, like in deathly peril, for part 2 when she faces when the Kryptonians are going to use her to get to you, and
Mm-hmm.
then but again, it's just like write a better out, like write a different scenario, like with the neck snapping in Man of Steel. Don't write it so that he has to snap the neck. It's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Look, great. They in '78 they put Superman in a scenario where they thought time travel was the solution. Okay, don't put him in that scenario. Same way in 2013, don't put him in the scenario where he has to snap the guy's neck.
Right.
It's the same criticism. It's on the writer not to put him in that scenario, especially when the rules of your movie said that you set up in that movie. You cannot interfere in human history. So you set the rule, and then, we'll just break it.
Yep.
That's what gives me issue. But aside from again, I think bottom line, the movie is still incredible.
Yes.
It is the standard bearer that a lot of comic book movies try to emulate.
Mm.
And I will never get tired of watching this movie.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts before we give it a letter grade?
Yeah, I'm completely in agreement. You know, I it's like I smile every time I see Christopher Reeve because it's like that sentimental thing of like he's just so perfect in the role.
Yeah.
That it's like, you know, every time I see him as Superman, it just warms my heart.
Yeah.
I think the key thing that we can address too is that, you know, Kevin Feige's been on record multiple times that this was still Superman the movie was still the blueprint for the entirety of the MCU, right? Like if Kevin Feige doesn't see this movie when he does, the MCU probably turns out a lot differently, right? Even I could see Sam Raimi making Spider-Man 1 somewhat of a blueprint.
Well, look at if you think about the 3 Spider-Man movies, kind of emulate the 3 of the 4 Superman movies, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. In the first one, Superman fights his main nemesis, which is Lex Luthor. In the first Spider-Man fights Goblin. In the second Superman fights the Kryptonians, which have this same or similar powers to him.
Yeah.
In Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock has similar abilities, you know, with the tentacles to Spider-Man. And in Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man fights his inner demons, which is the black suit, and Superman is confronted by his inner demons in Superman 3. So the blueprint is there.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's a good call.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, no, yeah, but it is the standard 100%. You know, I know we can we can talk all day, and we can make the debate all day of, like, was Batman 89 or was Superman 78?
Well, here,
That it started off.
I'll clear the debate. Here's the
Yeah,
debate. Superman 78 started it. Batman 89 changed the way you make it.
exactly,
So
exactly. We don't have one without the other. Yes,
Superman 78 started the genre.
yes,
It made making comic book movies okay.
yes,
Batman 89 showed you how to make a summer blockbuster and how to market a summer blockbuster. Changed the way you did those. So both had a profound effect
yes.
on the genre. And then the Avengers introduced us to, so then let's take it a step. Spider-Man was sort of, I mean, sure, there was X-Men and Blade in there too that you have to count to, but Spider-Man was really the one that was like the reawakening of the genre after Batman and Robin.
Here. Mm-hmm.
Then the Avengers changed the game with Cinematic Universe, the first Avengers movie.
Yep.
It seems to me, with all the kind of the somewhat struggle that Marvel's having, again, I don't want to put pressure, but it seems to me that Superman 2025, being the start of this brand new shared DC universe, has the potential to be another swing moment, a change moment.
Oh yeah, it can definitely be like a rebirth for the genre, 100%.
So it's
Especially
just funny
for DC. Oh yeah.
how the movie that started it could also revitalize it.
Yes, 100%. Oh yeah.
James, no pressure. Listen,
No pressure, James.
all you have to do is make a good movie. For me, this is all you have to do. Make a good movie, make it true to the character, respectful of the character, and make enough money to warrant continuation of the DCU franchise. That's all you have to do for me. If you want to make a movie that also changes the game again for the genre, go for it.
Right.
But yeah, so there's no denying the impact of this movie, and
yes.
to try and deny the impact of this movie is silly.
Yeah.
Like it's like Team DC, Team Marvel, throw that stupidity out the window. Trying to deny the impact of this movie is ridiculous.
Yep.
And with that said,
well said.
I'll give this movie an A-.
I'm gonna give it an A- too. Actually, I'm in the same boat.
And again, largely because that time travel thing at the end, really,
it's the only thing. Yeah.
If it's not for that, it's probably an A, if not an A+.
Right.
But that just,
yeah.
I wish they had done something different.
I know.
But hey, listen, it's still top tier.
Very much, yes.
If you haven't watched it, where the hell have you been on this earth?
Watch it.
My question. Watch it. If you haven't watched it in a long time, it's always good for a rewatch. Always time.
Exactly.
Especially in today's day and age where you turn on the TV and all there is negative. The news is negative. Everything's negative.
Yes.
Just put Superman the movie in and smile.
Yes.
We could all use a little bit of that. But we are going to continue our coverage of Superman in, obviously, comic books, but also film. As we continue to barrel forward to James Gunn's Superman. But until our next episode, you can talk to us about Superman and the DCU on social media. So, Nick, where do they track you down?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd at Nick Zennick, and you guys can follow me over at the Vigilante 1939 podcast as well, where we talk all things DC, Marvel, Star Wars, box office. I have film reviews on there as well, so go give that. Go subscribe over to my podcast and look me up on Twitter. Thank you, Adam.
All right, and definitely do that. I agree. Also, if you want to follow me, you can at Adam_LeesFan. On Twitter, I refuse to call it X. We also have the Facebook group, which is in the description below. Click that. I will add you, and we can continue the conversation there if you like. But until next time, remember that Superman, the movie, is forever. From the first time we see Christopher Reeve take flight to the last. So long, everybody.